Hi, kids. We are starting a new series called The Books of Enoch. So, this is kind of a biblical journey, for lack of a better sense, about lack of a better word. I don't know what it is. I have watched a movie-ish type thing about the Books of Enoch, and I thought it was very interesting. And kind of halfway through that, it made my mind explode, and I don't think I absorbed it all. But so the Book of Enoch is not, I guess, recognized book of the Bible. However, um, I don't know. Maybe it'll tell us what it is. There's a lot of parallels, and maybe it might fill in the gaps of some things in the Bible. Um, that is controversial. I don't know. We'll go on this journey together, and we'll figure out what we think of it together. I think so. There's three different books in here. One talks about Ethiopic, Slavonic, and Hebrew. So I don't know if it's the same thing talked about in different languages. I don't know. So we'll go through it together. If you watched my whole Bible story, you know that I'm a total queen at mispronunciation. I have tried to prepare ahead of time and did my research so I don't look like such an idiot straight off the bat, but we'll see how it goes. I'll probably prove my intelligence soon enough. So, without further ado, let's start. I'm going to read the introduction because I feel like maybe that'll help us know what we're talking about. So, let's start on page 7 of the Books of Enoch, the Angels, the Watchers, and the Nephilim. So, here's the introduction. Our search for deeper understanding often leads beyond the Bible itself. Even in our attempt to fully understand the Bible, we must go beyond the book. As we encounter references to social conditions, cultural practices, and even other writings mentioned within the scriptures, we are called to investigate and expand our knowledge in order to fully appreciate the context, knowledge base, and cultural significance of what is being taught. Thus, to fully understand the Bible, we are necessarily drawn to sources outside of the Bible. These sources add to the historical, social, or theological understanding of biblical times. As our view becomes more macrocosmic, we see the panoramic setting and further understand the full truth within the scriptures. Yet, in the case of Enoch, we are not going beyond the Bible. We are simply going beyond our Bible. The book of Enoch is contained in the Bible of the Ethiopic Christian Church. Well, we already answered one question, didn't we? Okay, so popular texts among early Christians. To lead us to sources of information outside of our Protestant and Catholic Bibles, we must know which books were popular and important at the time the Bible was being written. There are several books mentioned in the Bible which are not included in our Bible. They are not spiritual canon, either because they were not available at the time the canon was originally adopted, or at the time that they were not considered inspired. In cases when inspiration was questioned, one could argue that any book quoted or mentioned by a prophet or an apostle should be considered a spiritual canon. Unfortunately, this position would prove too simplistic. Books and writings can fall under various categories such as civil records and laws, historical documents, or spiritual writings. A city or state census is not inspired, but it could add insight into certain areas of life. Spiritual writings, which are directly quoted in the Bible, serve as insights into the beliefs of the writer or what was considered acceptable by society at the time. As with any new discovery, invention, or belief, the new is interpreted based upon the structure of what came before. This was the way in the first century Christian church, as beliefs were based on old Jewish understanding. However, one should realize pagan beliefs were also added to the church as non Jewish populations were converted, bringing them with them bringing with them the foundations of their beliefs on which they interpreted Christianity. Well, I'm already doing great, aren't I? Okay. In the case of Jude, James, Paul, and others, the Jewish past was giving way to the Christian present, but their understanding and doctrine were still being influenced by what they had learned and experienced previously. It becomes obvious that to understand the Bible, one should endeavor to investigate the books and doctrines that most influence the writers of the Bible. The Dead Sea Scrolls found in the caves of Qumran are of great interest in the venture of clarifying the history and doctrine in existence between biblical times and the fixing of canon. The scrolls were penned in the 2nd century BC and were in use at least until the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. Similar scrolls to those found in Cave 4 within the 11 caves of Qumran were also found at the, I didn't look this one up, Masada stronghold, which fell in 73 AD. Fragments of every book of the Old Testament except Esther were found in the caves of Qumran, but so were many other books. Some of those books are considered to have been of equal importance and influence to the people of Qumran and to the writers and scholars of the time. Some of those studying the scrolls found in Qumran were the writers of the New Testament. Sorry for my pauses. I'm checking my notes to make sure I say things right. Adjust my glasses in a scholarly way. Okay. Now I lost my place. Okay, knowing this, one might ask which of the dozens of non-canonical books most influence the writers of the New Testament. It is possible to ascertain the existence of certain influences within the Bible context by using the Bible itself. The Bible can direct us to other works in 3 ways. The work can be mentioned by name, as is the book of Joshua. The work can be quoted within the Bible text, as is the case with the book of Enoch. The existence of the work can be alluded to, as is the case of the missing letter from the Apostle Paul to the Corinthians. Okay, now we will talk about books mentioned in the Holy Bible. In the case of those books named in the Bible, one can set up a list as titles are named. The list is lengthier than one might at first suspect. Most of these works have not been found. Some have been unearthed, but their authenticity is questioned. Others have been found, and the link between scripture and scroll is generically accepted. Not generically, generally. Following is a list of books mentioned in the Holy Bible. Okay, so this is kind of like right now, kind of like a study guide is the way that I'm interpreting it. Now, I think that it does change as we go on. And you never know. As I get through all of this, I might decide to delete this video if it's not I don't know. We'll see. We've got 20 some pages of this for what it's worth. I won't get through all of it today. It is a little dry reading. It sounds very scholarly, but we'll start with the books mentioned in the Holy Bible. Number 1, the book of Joshua. And then it's got little quotes because I think it's giving you examples of where you would find those references. Okay, so bear with me. Also, he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Joshua. And that's listed in 2 Samuel 1:18. It is not written. Is it not written in the book of Joshua? And the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. That was in Joshua 10:13. Okay, so number 2, books of wars of the Lord. Therefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord. So that was in Numbers 21:14. Number 3, This is the Annals of Jehu. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, first to last, behold, they are written in the Annals of Jehu, the son of Hanani, which is recorded in the book of Kings of Israel. That was 2 Chronicles 20:34. Number 4, the book of the Kings. As to his sons and the many oracles against him and the rebuilding of the house of God, behold, they are written in the treatise of the book of Kings. Then Amaziah, his son, became king in his place. That was in 2 Chronicles 24:27. I really feel like this is kind of boring right now, and I kind of want to skip around. So I'm going to. If you want to read it yourself, you can get this book. This is what it looks like. There's the author. And you can read it yourself. But obviously, I kind of have a little ADD, and I'm like, hey, moving on. Okay, so there are several books which have come to us entitled Book of Joshua. One is an ethical treatise from the Middle Ages. It begins with a section on the mystery of the creation of the world. It is clearly unrelated to the biblical book of Joshua. Another was published in 1829, supposedly translated by Flaccus Albinus Alcuin. It opens with chapter 1, verse 1, reading, while it was the beginning, darkness overspread the face of nature. That was now considered a fake. The third and most important is by Midrash. The first translated into English in 1840. It opens with chapter 1, verse 1, reading, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and God created man in his own image. A comparison of Joshua 10:13 with Joshua 88:63-64 and 2 Samuel 1:18 with Joshua 56:9 makes it clear that the book of Joshua at least follows close enough with the Bible to be the book of Joshua mentioned in the Bible. I think this is just getting references of like how you know it's legit, maybe. Anyway, missing epistles. The existence of a lost book can be inferred even if no text is available. That is clearly seen with several missing epistles. Paul's letter to the church at, I might have found this one, Laodicea appears to be missing, according to some scholars. Colossians 4:16 states, when this letter is read among you, have it also read in the church of the Laodiceans, and you, for your part, read my letter that is coming from Laodicea, since 3 earlier manuscripts do not contain the words at Ephesus in Ephesians 1:1. Some have speculated that the letter coming from Laodicea was in fact the letter of Ephesians. Apostolic fathers also debated this possibility. In Paul's first letter to Corinth, he predated that letter by saying, I wrote you in my letter not to associate with immoral people. This can really be a reference to the present letter of 1 Corinthians. The book of Enoch may be most influential. Of all the books quoted, which I obviously didn't read in because I got ADD, of all the books quoted, paraphrased, or referred to in the Bible, the book of Enoch has influenced the writers of the Bible as few others have. Even more extensively than the Old Testament, the writers of the New Testament were frequently influenced by other writings, including the book of Enoch. It is not the purpose of this work to make judgments as to the validity or worth of the book of Enoch, but rather to simply put forth a meaningful question. Is not the non-canonical book that most influenced the thought and theology of the writers of the New Testament worth further research and contemplation? Okay, so then I'm going to jump around here a little bit because I'm kind of bored. It talks about the book of Enoch, discovering it and dating it. It says, I'm going to paraphrase here. They date it, most scholars date it back to sometime during the 2nd century BC. What they don't know what earlier oral tradition, if any, the book contains. It was inspired and authentic by certain Jewish sects in the first century BC and remained popular for at least 500 years. It was apparently originally derived from a Greek manuscript. It was discovered in the 18th century, and assumed to then have penned after the beginning of the Christian era. So they're assuming that it was heavily influenced by writers such as Jude and Peter. Um, Recent discoveries of copies of the book among the Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran proved the book was in existence before the time of Jesus Christ. Okay, so it's saying that the New Testament did not influence the book of Enoch, but rather Enoch influenced the New Testament. So they're saying, is it inspired, authentic, or fake? It's been largely the opinion of historians that it does not really contain authentic words of the ancient Enoch, since he would have lived several thousand years earlier than the first known appearance of the book attributed to him. Boy, I'm confused now. However, first century Christians accepted the book as inspired, if not authentic. I might have to look up what inspired means in reference to books of the Bible. They relied on it to understand origin and purpose of many things, from angels to wind, sun, and stars. Key concepts used by Jesus Christ seem directly connected to terms in the book of Enoch. Um, in this case, it is suggested that Enoch expands Genesis chapter 6. So there's parallels between Enoch and the Holy Scriptures, feeling like the stories maybe are intertwined. And then it gives it an example where in Enoch it says that there's corrupt earth eating animals, bloodshed, 364-day year, 12 months times 30 plus 4, Enoch goes to heaven. Maybe those are all different things. Oh, yeah, corrupt earth, human way, corrupt on earth, eating animals. Like they kind of line it all up. Yada, yada, yada. So, other connections like Azazel in Leviticus, scapegoat is sent into the wilderness to Azazel. Let me look in Azazel. The reference only makes sense if the writer believes that Azazel was responsible for all human sins and would bear punishment for it, as the Book of Enoch declares. Oh, let's see. How Jesus and his followers used Enoch. It's hard to avoid evidence that Jesus not only studied the book, but also respected it highly enough to allude to its doctrine and content. Enoch is replete with mentions of the coming kingdom and other holy themes. It was not only Jesus who used paraphrases or ideas from Enoch. There are over 100 comments in the New Testament which find precedence in the book of Enoch. So then it's got like all those examples, which I'm not going to give because it's kind of hard to do that. So, yeah. Talks about Enoch's popularity, which I'm going to skip over. How Enoch disappeared. That might be worth skimming. Enoch posed problems for some theologians. Instead of re-examining their in theology, they sought to dispose of what was counter to their beliefs. Enoch was declared a fake and was rejected by Hilary, Jerome, and Augustine, lost to Western Christendom for over 1,000 years. However, some view the Book of Enoch as prophetic, not only as a timeline, but being a picture into what is coming to all those who believe and are obedient by God. So then it's got a quote, by faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. That was Hebrews 11:5. So it says Enoch experienced rapture in his time before the judgment of the flood. So that would be before Noah's Ark, um, which is well, in the beginning of the Old Testament. So um, then it goes on to talk about Enoch supporting biblical end time prophecy. And I think that's where we're going to, well, let me just hit that one right now. It says it may inform and prepare us for coming events. There are some prophecies contained in the book of Enoch that are as applicable as those written in the books of Daniel and Revelations. So for almost 2,000 years, we only knew the references made to Enoch's 70 generations in the Bible. Without having the book itself, we could not have known it was being quoted in the Bible, sometimes word for word by Peter and Jude. And so then it's got some scripture here. The Lord, having saved a people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not, and angels that had kept not their own principality, but left their proper habitation, he hath kept in everlasting bonds under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner are set out as examples. That was Jude 5:7. And here's another one. For if God spared not the angels when they sinned, but cast them down into hell and committed them to the pits of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. That's 2 Peter 2:4. Um, again, it goes on with comparison. So they've got some comparisons on, let's see here. The calendar, I'm going to skip over that. The three different texts. I think it has to do with the first book of Enoch is Enoch escaped the 6th century church suppression in the Mediterranean area. So second book of Enoch survived far away, long after the originals from which it was copied were destroyed or hidden. It has evidence of many later additions to the original manuscript. Unfortunately, later additions and the deletion of teachings considered erroneous rendered the text unreliable. So then the last great book of Enochian tradition is the third book of Enoch, also known as the Hebrew book of Enoch, which makes me wonder if we should even read Enoch book 1 and 2. It was written in Hebrew, but has a few Latin and Greek words and cognates. Talks about Enoch ascending to heaven and being translated into the angel Metatron. That sounds like a Transformer name. Well, that's interesting. So that's kind of the preface into the book of Enoch. And I don't know that I have answers to all the questions I did when we started. Maybe if I would have read the whole thing instead of skimmed it, I would be better. But I don't know. I'm wondering if we should just maybe read the third book of Enoch first and see what we think about that. And I can go back maybe to the other ones if we like it. So if you're bored, don't give up on me, because we will get to reading it next time.